All right, welcome back. This is WUB, Wake Up Belize Morning Vibes on a Friday morning. And we're having interesting conversations about protection of animals and learning how to treat animals and understanding a kind of an area that we take for granted, which is veterinary science. But now we're going to talk about diaspora relations and looking at how our people in the diaspora look at our situation in Belize and just that connection that is formed between those who have left and those who are still here. We've invited Miss Marcelle Cattouse to be our guest this morning. She has lived in the States for many, many years.
Over 50.
Always been active, but she's back home now in Belize. First of all, welcome, my sister.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me.
Yeah. We said that this is going to be a conversation.
Yeah.
I am going to be asking some questions and getting a feedback from you. Tell us a little bit about your time away from Belize. When did you leave? How long did you stay?
Okay. Well, I left Belize in 1966.
Okay.
Right after high school. My family, my mom was, leaving, and she's taking all of us. So I didn't want to go.
Oh.
I did not want to go. And I remember leaving and going up, getting on the plane and sitting, I think it was Stan at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as the plane was leaving, tears were just coming down my face, and I'm saying, I am going to come back home one day. Even now, saying that just give me thrills. So being back I'm living my best life.
Okay.
But when I arrived in New York, we went into Harlem.
Oh.
And it was November.
Ooh,
so it was cold.
Yeah.
And I had this impression from home, from people coming back, that, it's all bright lights and beautiful places. And as we drove up, I'm seeing the buildings look like there was a bomb, like the windows are blown out, the garbage can rolling across the street. I'm like, this is where you all are bringing me? But I understand why Mom wanted us to go, is access for further education and for herself too, and to make a better life for us.
Clearly.
So it was not at all what I expected. There were no trees. I was like, no grass. I was sitting in St. Hilda's College in the window looking out at Government House and the ocean, and they plucked me up from there, and here I am looking at brick walls, right?
Yeah.
But I started working in the financial district. I worked down in Wall Street for a while.
Okay.
And this was like in 1966, 67. And I was amazed that most of the Afrocentric people or black people that were working down there were Caribbean people. And I was really amazed. And there were few Belizean people working down there. So I really enjoyed that, and I did that for a while. And then I got married, and I went on then to work in different areas. I worked in banking as well as that. So and in terms of personally interacting with a whole different community, of course, which was predominantly white, and it was kind of a little shock. It was a little shock, right?
What was were you saying back in the 60s, what was the relationship between Belizeans over there and Belize? And the happenings of Belize? What was the interest?
Oh my gosh, it was so tight. It was much tighter than it is now. People really cared. My great aunt, where she lived, she helped women who had gone to work and taking care of the children back home. And they worked sleeping, what they call sleeping jobs, babysitter stuff. And they only got like 1 day a week off, and they would come on Thursday. So my aunt would let them come and stay there at her house without charging them for that. And then they would go out and shop and go to the post office, and they were always mailing their boxes. Oh, forget Christmas time. You know, people really cared, and people helped each other. Very much so, much more so now. I think that has changed a lot.
I remember, in fact, I think it was Henry Young and I were having this conversation about how on that day off, there were sometimes 5, 6, 7 women in the living room, sleeping on the floor because, you know, they couldn't go and buy their own apartment or have their own apartment. So they depended on Belizeans like your mother.
Like my great aunt, Iris Lightburn, and she went to live in America in about 1947. So she had been there for a while, and she understood their plight, you know. And I mean, you heard stories, and it was just awesome. And people really helped, like you said, and they would send. They really they worked. Just to send money home to help their children and their family.
You know that we often blame the breakdown of our family unit on that movement of Belizeans going abroad. You left your picnic, you left it for your auntie or your granny or your ma, and because the parents were in the States really struggling to try to survive, that breakdown took place. And so it is said that when Belizeans started to fall down was really directly related to Haiti and right after Haiti when so many Belizeans left. Do you accept that responsibility in that way, or do you think other things contributed to the breakdown?
That is a part of it, but I don't think it tells the full story. Because from what I know, the majority, I wouldn't say all the women didn't turn their back on their children. The majority of them that I knew took care of their children and sent money home to their significant other or their husband. As a matter of fact, I know stories of women sending all their money home to their significant other, their husband, planning on coming back home. And some of them did. And when they came back, there was nothing. The man had squandered everything. And there were some instances where the men would even report them to the American embassy and say where they would, so that they would be deported because they wanted them to come back home. And so those kinds of things happen. And there were many women that were devastated like that. Belizean women left Belize. They had to leave Belize because they couldn't make a living. Just like the brain drain and people who were looking for education and for a better life. Most of them didn't want to leave Belize, didn't hate. Belize is a beautiful place, but there was no opportunity. So they didn't have, an option but to try to go elsewhere.
Talk about another aspect of this diaspora movement in the early days, and perhaps it still happened today. But I could remember women having arranged marriage to a man that they didn't necessarily even sleep with, but had to pay in order for them to get that piece of paper so that they could start their legalizing process. Did you experience that with some of your friends? Did you know about circumstances like that? And how did it happen?
Well, not with any of my personal friends, but I know of instances, right? That people would, what they say, hook somebody up like an American, and they would pay, $10,000 or whatever.
So much?
Sometimes that much.
Wow.
And they had to live together. They had to cohabitate for a while because sometimes immigration would come and check, you know, the apartments to make sure that you live there. So there was a big thing. And a lot of the times it worked out that they got their papers and then they went their separate ways. There was not, and there were times when the situation didn't turn out as well as they would have expected, as with anything else. But that was one avenue that women found. Men too. Men did it too, right? It wasn't only women. There were men that contracted with women to get their papers. To this day, there's still people it's still going on because it's one of the few legal ways of getting your paper, unless you're related to someone who's a citizen or a permanent resident, you know, that they can file for you and you get preferential treatment in terms of getting your visa. Now with this present situation, I don't even know how that is working. But that is back then.
A lot of it probably has dried up significantly now. What about raising children in America? I know you raised your children. You talked very openly on Facebook about your daughter. The idea of raising the children in America and keeping them somehow connected to original Belize. Do you raise them totally to be American and they forget about Belize? How do you navigate that?
Primarily, I think I did it without even being conscious, and it was through food, because I cooked from scratch, just like my aunt did, just like this, you know, the same way we cook. They know rice and beans and potato salad and stew chicken from the time they open their eyes, and plantain, right? And the other aspect was the music. It was always calypso or West Indian music or, you know, the Caribbean bands or Belizean bands. They know. And as well, I was always, I was always involved with the Belizean community. And so they were always around. So I think that is the way it happened. And it wasn't something I calculated. And my youngest daughter said to me, not very long ago, she said, Mom, she said, you know, the way you raised us, she said, it gave us a sense of belonging. And I think people don't realize how important the sense of belonging is, because being in that environment, it's so fractionalized, there's so many different people, and even if you don't communicate on a regular basis with your group, it's just once in a while, you feel like you have somewhere that you can go, or when there's a party or a christening or a birthday or a wedding, you know, that's when we kind of all got together. But
your issues about Belize now, I know that Mr. Compton Fairweather back in the 50s and the 60s kept Belizeans, especially in the New York area, alerted. There used to be a number that you dial,
and you had to listen to the news.
I did all the news. Talk about that period.
I did religiously. I did.
How did that work?
Well, like you said, there was a phone number he had. How he set it up, I have no idea. But I know, I don't remember if it was like on a Friday or a Saturday, he would have new segments. And you would listen in, and he would update of all the things that were happening. I was particularly interested during the WUB days, because I was like, dang, I should have been in Belize. You know? And that really excited me to see young people coming up and making a stance and say, we want change, and being bold and being up there, because we were not like that, you know? And with Evan X and Norman and other people, yourself and people who I knew, I was elated, and I so wanted, I wish I could have come back home, you know? But so he kept people apprised or know what was happening. And likewise, when there were storms or hurricanes and stuff, it was an avenue through which people mobilized, and they could get together, and there would be churches. There was one church in Brooklyn, and the basement was used, and people would bring their donations there, and other people would come and volunteer for hours to sort them and pack them and stuff like that. So people in the diaspora really have a heart and care for love Belize.
Yeah.
I think sometimes some of them feel like they're not appreciated by Belizeans back home.
Yes.
And I haven't really put my finger, I kind of think I know why, but I think that some Belizeans back home look at people who live and said, well, you deserted us. You know, you went away and you didn't care about the country, and now you're doing well. Not necessarily, because a lot of them are not really doing well.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there's this, I think, an animosity almost sometimes.
Yeah.
So people in the diaspora sometimes feel like, well, the only time people in Belize need us is when there's a hurricane or when they want us to give something, and they don't appreciate us, right? They just kind of, I don't even say dog us out, but they just blame them for living and blame them for having gone.
Yes.
But for the most part, those people that left for a huge
mostly
heartfelt
for
reason.
economic reasons.
For economic reasons.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another one of the interesting phenomena about especially the New York area is this idea that the divide politically, PUP and IP, which eventually became UDP, there was always this sense that the majority of people in the diaspora was anti-George Price, anti-PUP.
Anti-PUP.
And so the assumption was, particularly because Mr. Compton was working so closely with Mr. Golson, that it became the diaspora was looked at by many PUPs
as the arm of
this the one extension of the opposition.
Yeah.
And so part of that animosity that you talk about had some political leanings in it.
I didn't think of that. I didn't.
You know, so but the fact that this assumption, and it is a lot of it is an assumption, but it was a strong assumption that the people in the diaspora are anti the government because the government, of course, was PUP for so long,
for
that
such a long
period that
time.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
So tell me about your own experience with that and how you looked at it. Did you take a political side? Were you looking at it through that prism that, you know, this is a George Price and this is a PUP?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I always, and I still do now, I'm a nationalist. I'm not red, I'm not blue.
Excellent.
And I get a lot of problems with that because when I'm around people who are PUP and I have family and friends, they say, you're the undercover UDP. When I'm with UDP, they tell me I'm the undercover PUP. I'm like, why can't I just be non-aligned? You're in this country, you're not allowed to be non-aligned.
No. They read in your thought.
They won't pigeonhole you, no matter what you say, right? But
can I stop you for a second and share with the audience that this is the granddaughter of Mr. Albert Cattouse, who was one of the founding members of the People's United Party, one of the colleagues and confidants of Mr. George Price.
Yes, he was.
So that was interesting, wasn't it? To
Definitely.
be a Cattouse?
To be a Cattouse, but then, that's on my dad's side, but then my mother, her mother, who was Doris Belafonte, worked with Golson and Lee Richardson and that faction that was the opposition. I think my grandmother used to be referred to as the diplomat, right? Because she was fiery and stuff. She died early in her early 40s. But so in my house, growing up, I always was around both factions.
Yes,
Or, you know, because sometimes, so then my grandmother was NIP or whatever. So my mom, you follow, you know, behind what they're prayer. So my mom became a big NIP.
Yeah.
So, and when she went to meeting at courthouse or whatever, I was stand along. When they had marches through the street, I was stand along. I remember one time, we're in a march with my mom and we passed Freetown, and I spot my grandfather on his veranda. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Granddad gonna see me. And I'm trying, because Granddad was very instrumental in helping me with school and stuff, because my dad left for London when I was like a year and 4 months old. He went to pursue boxing because he was a really good boxer. And he went to London, he never came back. So my grandfather used to help me. He studied.
Yeah.
And when he went on his trips to London and stuff, he would come back and tell me stories. I would go to his drugstore when I wanted a little $5 to go to Shama and buy, you know, their frosted whatever they had.
Yes.
And I used to go with him to cricket matches at MCC ground.
Yes.
I used to go with him to horse races because he was a big horse race man.
Horse race.
Oh my gosh, I do.
Heard, yeah.
Oh, and he had
So you
horses.
really, you have an interesting history there, and a lot of us have that history of part of our parentage is NIP, part of our parentage is PUP, and I love that story about undercover PUP and undercover UDP. You're the sneaking, I forget it.
Yeah, forget
And
things.
believe it or not, it still happens today. People look at you and say, I know
I'm
you're
telling you, it's happening to me daily now.
Oh, all right, our telephone number here is 280-5848. Please join us in the conversation.
Please.
Our guest is a person from out of the diaspora who has returned now to Belize. She's also one of the members of the board of directors of the Love Foundation. She has been involved significantly in helping different areas. Let's take our next break, and when we come back, we'll make sure that the phone lines are open so we can get our calls in. We'll take the break. My guest this morning is Marcelle Cattouse, and she is giving us that whole personal experience of living in America for so many years and then returning to Belize. Our number here is 280-5848 if you'd like to join the conversation and reminisce a little bit or ask some questions to Ms. Cattouse. If we could continue along the line of the diaspora today, over the last number of years, governments have been attempting to reconnect with the diaspora. This government in particular has gone even one step further and naming an ambassador, which means we're getting closer to really adopting the diaspora as a serious aspect of our governance process. But there are still Belizeans that are calling abroad who are calling for even more. Some have said, we would like to engage directly in the governance process. Some even wanted to go as far as being able to vote here. All right, let's take our first call for you. Welcome, caller.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
And Mom, I'm so proud of you of what you're doing for single parents and what you're doing to help out people that is unfortunate. It's one of a kind that, you know, it gotta be God. It gotta be God. I'm a single mother with 5 kids. I recently lost my job from the Department of Youth Service after 17 years serving the government.
Wow.
I am exhausted. I presently am seeking justice because after 17 years serving the government, They told me after 17 years my job is no longer available.
Wow.
But I am proud of what you are doing. I can knock on doors now. As a woman that went through so much abuse, I was abused in most environments when I was out there with the kids.
Yeah.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually.
Yeah.
I documented all my abuse and I submitted it to the ombudsman.
Yeah.
I even went to the Governor General. I even spoke to the Prime Minister.
Hey, caller, I hear you, but because I heard you call
I'm
earlier.
so proud of you, ma'am, that you can help
Yeah.
us single mother. The government, they're not really catering for us.
Yeah, caller, hello.
I remember going to
Caller.
the department seeking help.
Yeah, caller, I'm asking you, caller, I'm asking
I'm so
you.
proud of you, ma'am. I'm kudos to you guys.
I thank you and I wish you luck. I think maybe you should try to go to, do they have legal aid or something?
Yes, yeah.
That try to find legal aid to get your situation addressed through that aspect in terms of your job, and in terms of you having suffered abuse. You may need to get some counseling. There are organizations here now that will offer you counsel, that offers counseling,
Yeah.
that help you get your strength back so that you can move on with your life.
I heard this caller before, and she's called several times before, so we know her story.
Yeah.
And there is a need. Clearly, there is a need. And one of the things that have been discussed is the amount of professionals that we have in the diaspora.
Oh.
Counselors, people who deal with traumatized individuals, but they are very scarce in Belize. And so many have talked about diaspora relations being practically done by those in the diaspora who have professional skills, who would be able to come back home, not necessarily to come back to stay at the time.
Intermittently and like come through the summer months when school is out, or when the ones who work particularly in the school system. The counselors who work in the school system and have summers off and could come down. When I was in work, when I was teaching, I would come for the summers, but I would spend a lot of time at the children's home.
Right, okay.
And I would go there and I would teach the people, try to teach the people who work there how to deal with the kids. Because the kids were traumatized. That place was supposed to hold like 25 kids. It was over 50 children.
Wow, wow.
And I mean, there is a need, but it has to be a marrying of government and people and the different organizations in the diaspora, the different Belizean organizations now that this present government is reaching out to for help, right? And I don't sometimes understand what kind of help they want. That seems to me that they're looking more for remittances and for help. There are other kinds of help that's available. That's much more important, but it's not cash help. And you have to put in your pound of weight too. If those people in the diaspora who have skills will come back, then they will need to be facilitated when they come home. They would have to have somewhere to stay. Maybe, they don't necessarily have to have an individual car or to move around, but they could maybe do a thing where they could carpool and do that. And then go into the school and have classes and stuff when the kids are out of school to work with the teachers. Within the schools that are closed up and not being used.
At night.
Even during the day. The teachers are on vacation, the kids are gone, the schools are locked up. And those buildings could be utilized. But it will take government initiative.
So where should that start? Should that start from diaspora organizations, or should that be done by, for example, there is a ministry now that has diaspora relations as their portfolio. Should it begin there?
It definitely has to begin there. And they have to go to people in the diaspora and ask them. I mean, I've seen them go around to, and I've been in Houston, where you know, they've had meetings and stuff like that.
Right.
My youngest daughter, as a matter of fact, is the president of the Belizean Houston Association right now, and she didn't even tell me she was going to do that, but I guess she just did naturally from what comes out. But and other people who are in that organization, and even in New York, when I was involved in New York with, I don't know if you remember, Partners for Development, which was something that Bert Tucker and Mr. Goldson started. We did a seminar at NYU. Mr. Goldson had come up. Mr. Goldson came and stayed in my house when he was traveling to Africa. He was going to attend a women's conference.
Yes,
and
I remember.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And he came, and I guess his budget wasn't big enough for. So Brett said, "Would you mind keeping?" I said, "Sure, Mr. Goldson." I moved my kids out their room, right? And so I was just thrilled by having him in the house, because I could pump him for all kind of conversations.
You could ask all kind of questions.
Exactly. So that was Mr. Goldson's brainchild. Just exactly what you're thinking about. And we had meetings, Norman and other people in New York would come to my house, and Mr. Goldson would sit and tell us, say, "You guys are the linchpin. Don't turn your back on Belize. You have to stay connected. And you know, you have to push these things." But then, as I saw, I moved away from New York to Houston after a while. But then I saw, after I left and it started spreading to different states, the organization became more of a who is who organization. And what actual work were they doing besides giving party and pontificate?
In those big hotels.
Big hotels and pontificate I don't know what they did. Maybe I'm not informed.
It's interesting that you say it, because I'm surprised with all the activities going on now with Aria and Miss Pitts and Bilal and so many others who are engaged. I am surprised that this concept of the consortium, which is what you're talking about, have not been revived. Because the original concept was exactly that.
Out of Mr.
You're
Goldson.
going to get all these talented Belizeans to start engaging themselves back. And it's still really not going on yet.
It was Mr. Goldson and Bert Tucker. I'm sure you know Bert. Bert, oh my gosh. Bert Tucker was the one who really Bert Tucker made me, not made me, but talked me into leaving my job in Wall Street and going to work at the UN.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I worked at the UN in a non-government liaison, where I worked a non-government liaison with UNDP. And I said, but they never pay me no money. He said, but look how much good you could do for Belize. And, you know, and I did, and I worked with Bowen back in the day. I worked with, when they came up to UN Best, I would direct them where to go, who was funding what, how you do it, how you apply for the funding. With Cynthia
I wonder
Ellis.
if anybody is doing that now. Is anybody replaced?
Cynthia Ellis, I worked. Rhonda, there was
I remember.
I worked with all those people at the UN. Bert used to be behind me. You got it, Dennis.
He was a pusher.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it. So I'm saying, and I don't think I'm unique. There are other people out there who can do the same thing, are doing some of the same thing, and want to do more, but they have to feel support.
Well, in closing, Ms. Cattouse, you've given us your personal story. You've given us an idea what it was like to, as a young teenager, to end up in crazy Harlem. I had that experience myself when I was young, leaving this bright, beautiful Belize and then going into the dark, dingy Harlem.
Lights on 24 hours a day.
Quite a cultural shock. But we brought it right up to the need for a bigger effort now on the part of Belizeans abroad and Belizeans at home to just link up. We now have platforms like Zoom, where an educator in New York
Could hold session.
can have
Can hold
15 people
sessions.
here, and they could do trainer
Oh,
of
yeah,
training
yeah.
type of thing. We're at the stage now where if we think and act smart,
Yeah.
we could advance. We don't need a plane ticket anymore
No.
to say, oh, I have to be on holiday, I have to do this in order to come home and help Belize. I can help Belize right where I am. But it requires a vision on both sides.
On both sides.
And we need to get rid of that animosity.
Yeah.
Left Belize, never
Yeah.
like Belize, hate Belize kind of mentality, which still exists with some
I
people.
know.
But I think to a large extent that we've tried to be a promoter of that in this
Yeah.
station here
I-
to get engaged.
Yeah, I would really, really love to encourage the government and their Ministry of that they're
Diaspora
reaching to
relations.
diaspora,
Yeah.
that to broaden their scope and not just only go for, a show and tell,
Yeah.
or have a narrow vision.
Yes.
Talk to the people in the organization. Find out what skills are involved. Try to set up something where they can give back, like you said, by Zoom.
yes.
I'm amazed at how proficient Belizeans are at computer, better than me.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're genius
Even
when
the
it comes
kids,
to that.
oh
IT.
man, tell me.
Yes,
I
yes.
feel like I have to call my tenor, my neighbor all the time, come help me with this.
Yeah.
Like, but you made a teacher, Marcelle, but I stopped when computer came in.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
You know,
Well, as we close, we need to encourage this kind of dialogue.
definitely.
And we need to ensure that we don't drop the ball when it comes to this. For example, the second annual summit. Last year, the summit took place in June. This year, it will take place in July. And it will be in, I believe, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's being organized as it was last year, also by Ms. Supnandan and Aria and Michael Young and all of those who were engaged in putting it together. A very successful one in Los Angeles last year, June.
Yeah.
Well, this year it will be in July.
Yeah.
And I need to tell them, you need to start doing some more ads and letting people know that this thing is going to happen.
I'm
because it's
related to Aria too. You
are you?
surprisingly, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We
all right.
share. My great grandmother was her grandmother's aunt or sister.
Ah, yeah,
but
yeah,
we are related.
Well,
so
I thought we
could-
blood run through one another. You might find you might
Yeah,
be related to
yeah.
the Simons then too.
I-
You never know.
You know what I think with that summit, if I don't know how it could be facilitated to come in, because it's going to take finance.
Yeah.
They should bring certain people from the different states and invite them to come there. Instead of they're moving this big body all around all the time, you can do that periodically.
Yeah.
But make people link there,
Okay.
and so that you're spreading, and then they can go back and share it with their organizations, because people who are involved in Belizean organization are not getting paid.
Yeah.
That is their time,
Yeah,
their
voluntary,
effort,
yeah.
their money, and nobody's telling them thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's telling them thanks.
Yeah.
They're not getting paid. But when the government is coming, they expect those people to just hop to
Yeah.
and do it. And some of them, and the thing about when you have volunteers, you have to appreciate your volunteers. You have to show them appreciation.
Yes, indeed.
You can't just take them for granted, because eventually, if you do, they
You're gonna
will
lose them.
filter
Yeah,
away.
yeah, lose them. Ms. Cattouse, I'll give you the final word. We've covered a wide area of conversation, but if you could encapsulate it, I'll give you your last few words.
My last few words is, I am so happy to be home.
Yes, I could imagine.
I live by the river. My property that Mom had runs from the the road to the river right beside Black Orchid.
Oh, wow.
I can lay in my bed and look at the river rolling by on my patio. The howler monkeys are in the trees eating my cashews as we speak, and the mangoes, and the iguanas are running in underground.
Oh, wow.
And I think, where else
You're
in the world?
paradise. You're in paradise.
Where else in the world can I be? So I love Belize.
Yeah.
I love my people. I try to do as much as I can to help, within limitation. Personally, one-on-one and through my work with Love Foundation.
Yes.
But I enjoy being home. And I just want to say to people, I'm not political. I am more practical in terms of what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are your projects? What I'm saying? It's not from the particular political aspect.
Yeah.
But what are you doing? And how you gonna get done? So, and I would like to ask people, and I can't tell people not to be diehard because that runs deep in our blood.
Yes, yes.
But just open your eyes. And I'm not saying from one party or to the other. I say both of them. Look at all of them. Look at who they bring up to present. First of all, into the party, to be at the forefront. What capacities do they have? How do they carry themselves? How do they comport themselves? What were they doing in the communities? How are they working in the communities where they're running to represent? Because when you get elected, your community, your constituency is your first line of defense. And it's also your first line of offense. As if you don't take care of that and you're looking to get up there to national and don't pay attention to these people, they can bring you right back down.
Absolutely.
So do the work. Be good. Do good work. I love being home and I love you all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cattouse. This brings us to the end of our program for today. We want to thank Ms. Cattouse for coming and just having a grounding conversation. She doesn't represent any organization or any group. She comes here just as a Belizean citizen with an experience of 50 years in the United States and then back home. And we wanted to share that experience, and we thank you very much for being here for that.
Thank you for having me.
We also want to thank Dr. Palacio, Ludwig, and also Dr. Stephanie Valero, subhanallah. Let me not make the mistake. Novello, I'm sorry, Miss Novello, Dr. Novello, and Dr. Palacio for the veterinary science. We appreciate that very much. Okay, we look forward to seeing you again next week. Belizeans, let's thank those who were in the background. We have Anthony Grant downstairs in the simulcast. Upstairs we had Christy Flowers as our MC this morning. And of course, Mr. Clifton Lewis, always there, well organized, stage manager, song engineer, all around man.
He told me he knew my grandfather. He worked at Radio Belize.
Yes. So when you pass the Albert Cattouse building, I know listen, I don't talk about the Albert Cattouse building anymore. It's like
and MCC grounds.
Digicel and all that kind of thing.
MCC grounds is there because of my grandfather and cricket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of history that we don't know about those early people, and we need to. Your foundation as a nation has a lot to do with what happened in the past. So never close your eyes as a young person. Never close your eyes to understanding the history of Belize and appreciating the diversity of our history. It makes you stronger. Belizeans, stand strong and stand firm. Do the right thing under all conditions. And for now, we're gone!